Welcome to Suncoast In Depth. My name is Brett Watson, and today I am super excited to be joined by my daughter, Lauren,
Hi.
a.k.a. Pumpkin.
Yes.
So, I actually wrapped this series up last video.
Very like you to do.
Just kidding. So I wanted to do this, though, because we had talked about doing it via Zoom with you and Ryan, but podcasting to Zoom is really hard.
Likely more work than you get out of it. Yeah. It's worth.
So you're here, though.
I am.
And part of the reason you're here is because today's your birthday.
It is.
Yeah.
32.
Kind of had a tearful discussion last night about that. Yeah.
Which tends to appear like clockwork.
Yeah.
Every single year on November 20th, about 11:07 p.m. It like hits me, you know.
You said something like, I'm where I am at 32, where I should have been at 22.
Yeah.
To which I said, I'm where I am at 55, where I should have been at 32. So.
And then I said, it's also weird that I remember you at 32.
Yeah.
I have memories of you at 32.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You're my
year.
only biological kid out of 5 kids.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep.
I don't even think about that. Actually, that's so funny. I had this conversation with my mom last night about like how I'm fortunate because I have every kind of sibling that you can have except for a full sibling.
Yeah.
So I have step siblings. I have my biologically half brother Jack, and then I have a foster sister, Christine. I have adopted siblings.
Yep.
So it's cool because it really, my experience is a really beautiful example of how technicalities really don't mean anything.
Yeah.
So
Love is thicker than blood.
definitely.
Faux show.
Bar
I
none.
should coin that.
You should.
I
Someone
don't think
hasn't
anybody's
already.
ever said that.
Copyright. Is that my camera? Yes. Okay, cool.
Probably someone has actually said that before. But
Probably.
anyway, so what this series has been about, as you know, you've watched some of them.
Mm-hmm.
It's about reconstructing a faith that is sustainable. Mm-hmm. And I really did want to talk to you about this.
Yeah.
I didn't just say it because I'm your dad.
Yes.
It's because you do have a good story to share with
Mm-hmm.
people. You grew up when I was still an evangelical.
Mm-hmm.
So why don't you just go back and kind of share with everybody some of the memories that you have of living in that world. And then we'll talk about how that kind of deconstructed. And
Okay. Well, I have a ton of great memories from that world. And I still have many valuable relationships because of that world. So I definitely appreciated the thick community atmosphere that really being your kid brought. I mean, we had the communal household, right? We had the theater room. It was like we were everybody's Hail Mary, you know, and that was a really good environment to grow up in because it set a really great standard for what unconditional love looks like. That being said, okay, so remember how you homeschooled us or you tried. And I did a single year of it and was like, never again. And then I went back to public school, and that was like trying for us. I remember, like I felt that's when I kind of started to feel like the black sheep, you know, and it was
the black sheep where? In public school?
No. There I was pristine. It was at home that I was the black sheep because I had interests in things like shaving my legs and wearing a bra.
Right. Yes. Okay.
And teen scene, you know.
Yeah.
And so I think that, or I know that I have a lot of shame from that world, not from you guys per se. I mean, you are a product of your world, as were we. But I've recognized in my adult life how my perspective growing up was very subjective because of that kind of pressure cooker of an environment to be and understand and value purity
Yeah.
at the height of your hormonal period, like your puberty.
Yeah.
So you're actually asking for us to do biologically opposite of what
Yeah.
we're experiencing. And now studying medicine, I've, and I'm in the very beginning stages of, but I've witnessed it firsthand because of what my job is. And it's like indisputable, it's the standard we have, math and science. And so I recognize, okay, so like to give you an example, I have friend groups from that time that, like middle school and high school, that I used to make up stories about where I was just to not admit that I was with them, even though I wasn't even partaking in anything that they were doing,
Right.
just because of the affiliation, right?
Yeah.
And so I was defiant, right? And perceived as defiant and
And accused of being.
and accused of being and
Sorry.
secretive, and dabbling in and yeah, I mean, I remember I was drug tested and I wasn't worried, don't drug test me now, but because I knew I wasn't doing any of it, and but I still felt bad for just being friends with those people. Now I reconnect with them as adults, and they're like, we don't have a single memory of you that wasn't just you saying, what am I going to tell my dad and Arlene? What am I going to tell, what am I going to tell Kayla? What am I going to tell Ryan? Like, what if we run into Ryan and Chase? And even though, and it's like sad.
Yeah.
That those are their memories of me,
Mm-hmm.
And so, meanwhile, I remember having fun with them because they were just normal kids.
Yeah.
Even though I wasn't doing anything that I actually had to be lying about, you know?
Yeah.
It was just this expectation to understand and comprehend and truly value something where biologically you're just not at a place where that's really possible, but fortunately, okay, so did you have any more questions? Does that answer
go
your
ahead.
question?
Yeah.
Okay, so carry on.
So that was some of the upside and the downside. That's good, of growing up in that evangelical environment.
Yeah.
It does place a lot of unrealistic expectations on a person, especially a kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Your brain isn't fully developed.
No.
I mean, hormonally, you're off the charts. Like it's just not realistic.
Yeah.
And then
it invites so much shame.
right.
Yeah.
And
So I'm sorry for all that.
No,
I really am.
and I know I would bet my life every day, which is why you're still the first people that I, seek wisdom from, that I consult when I feel like I'm in crisis, because I never questioned that it was because you loved me. That's why I did follow your rules.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I didn't actually have anything to be lying about. It was just because I didn't want to be ridiculed for just being curious.
Yeah.
But I didn't know how to articulate that. And same thing, you guys lived in such a fear-driven environment, and you were given the responsibility of these lives.
Mm-hmm.
And from your own experience, you felt like you'd already let us down, and stuff. And so
Because of the divorce, you mean?
yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess because of that, it did offer a pretty open environment still at home. It was never, talking to you about any of my deconstruction has never been a scary thing, ever.
Good.
So really no need to be sorry. You only did what you knew was best,
Mm-hmm.
And I trust that. And you continue to evolve,
For sure.
so
Don't we all?
no need.
So would you say that, given that little bit of background there, would you say that your deconstruction was already kind of in its infancy during those teen years?
I would say it started, or I recognized it shortly after at Master's Commission.
Okay.
So it may not have started, but I didn't necessarily recognize it because we were relatively liberal.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like even for being evangelicals, like we had friends in our community at other youth groups that their parents were like apprehensive about us, which is hilarious when you think about it. And so kind of that is a tribute to the point that I just made, that there was never a closed environment there, you know?
Yeah.
So I would say that I really witnessed firsthand how just not immediately, but I guess how firsthand destructive, like hardcore evangelicalism can be when I went to Master's Commission.
Yeah, so just give a little explanation for those who don't know what Master's Commission is.
Okay.
Then what you experienced there that kind of opened your eyes.
Okay. It's no longer, but it was a discipleship program within
Assemblies of God?
Assemblies of God, yes. And because there used to be one at Church of Hope. And there was not anymore. And actually, Luis, a guy at Master's Commission, I was in Lafayette, Louisiana. We were called Crossroads Master's Commission, massive church, stadium seating, like huge.
And some really fine people.
But Luis was from Sarasota, and he started at the Church of Hope Master's Commission. And then,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, went to Crossroads. So that was cool. You know, it gave us some connections. Of course, Chris Lamaster was there, which he may have talked about in his episode. I can't remember.
I think he did, actually.
I watched it. I can't remember, though. And anyway, so I got there kind of, it was after a breakup, and I got there just kind of looking for a clean slate. And Jesus or church was still definitely what I would have, you know, clung to as home base. You know, like that's where I need to go to feel good again. So I went into this program.
And we had some relationship with the director.
Yeah, right. From our trip to Romania.
Right.
Right. So Chase Briner's older brother went there shortly after our trip to Romania.
Romania trip, yeah.
And then that's how Chris and I knew about it and went back. Chris actually went the year before me. So all of this to say, when I got there, I witnessed, or I just saw very quickly how comfortable they were with just telling you that you're wrong and shaming you. It was just within their nature. But then in the same breath, they'll say, you know, they'll scrutinize you for doing the same. And it was like, do you guys see yourselves? Is there a single mirror in the building? Like, it was laughable. And I was 19. I was not this, you know, super developed person. But it was just like I had a lot of secondhand embarrassment for them because I felt like, how do you expect to maintain the respect of these guys?
You mean like you watched the
leadership,
the lack of self-awareness in the leadership, and you were just
and the double
like,
standards.
This is cringy.
Yeah, exactly. It was like, am I the only person seeing this? Like, how, if you guys are going to do this, don't be dumb.
But you weren't the only
person.
No,
I was not. Yeah. And I keep in touch with a few of those guys still, and they're all doing great, which is just so wonderful, you know? But anyways, okay, take for instance, we did this mission with another Master's Commission in, I can't remember, Alabama somewhere, and Mobile. And so for all of October, it was called House of Horrors, and it was, you know, a Halloween ministry thing, a conversion thing. And so for all of the month of October, we would make the 4-hour trip back and forth between Lafayette and Mobile, I think every week. And we'd come back for church, and then we'd leave again, and we'd be there all week, and we'd come back for church. So we were making road trips constantly, okay? And I remember one of the women in leadership, she had like a few girls that were like her faves, you know? And she would just like use the church's money to like buy them Waffle House, and the rest of us had to eat like literally wet sandwiches. And I'd be like, okay, well, I have my own money and you won't let me get out of the bus. Like, they were so controlling. Okay. I remember I was scolded one time.
So you had your own money to go and buy something that you wanted to eat.
And they wouldn't let me.
But you weren't even allowed off the bus.
Right. Because of it would hold up. You know, we're trying to get back. We have to do the Lord's work. So it's going to hold us up, you know. But then meanwhile, Mish could get off and order, she and Mariah and whoever else they were. I can't remember, Anna. There were like a select few people. If you have to dub those out, that's fine.
They don't want to have to do that, though.
that she would like literally take extra time, and then we'd just be like sitting there having to pee. We're not allowed to like pee while she's ordering special orders for them. This is like a real story.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it was just like, are you guys clueless? You know, one time.
So what do you think she would say, like, if you were to ask her now, like, do you see that? Do you see the lack of consistency there? Do you, what would be her excuse for that? If you could try to think of something reasonable.
Reasonable, or what her excuse would be?
In her mind, reasonable. It's that hard.
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think like, well, the Lord knows best, but like, how do you even tie that in? I remember, okay, so I was going to say that other story. One time I was scolded for taking a shower longer than 3 minutes. Scolded. Okay. There was one night during House of Horrors where we had used fog machines, and this poor kid, Connor, had to pee so bad, but he wasn't allowed to leave a station, so he used one of the empty bottles, and then someone put it in one of the fog machines. Yeah. Okay. When we got home, I think there were like maybe 70 of us. Okay. When we got back to the house that we were staying at, only the elite, like the faves, were allowed to take showers. We just sleep in our sleeping bags like that.
With urine fog on you. Okay.
And in the name of, you know, for the Lord's work or suffrage or whatever, like, you know, we'll just imagine it's still better than if you live like this all the time, you know, whatever. It's just like perpetual gaslighting, man. Like textbook.
You know what's interesting? I'm thinking back, and I remember you and Chris calling me and just kind of in turmoil, like, what is my faith? Because it just, well, for obvious reasons. And I'm thinking it actually played a small role in my own deconstruction.
Really?
As I'm thinking back, yeah.
Because,
anyway.
like, okay, so again, with this is really the story that matters with the House of Horrors thing. There were two of us. Cecilia, do you remember her?
I remember the name.
She's doing great too. We both are extremely like sensory avoidant, and we didn't want to be painted. We didn't want to be demons in hell, and we didn't want to be painted. I'll do anything else, okay? And they made us do it. And she was literally sitting there sobbing, because she was so uncomfortable. That's abuse. And then they would make us give these, what are they called? Like altar call sermons, you know, at the end of the haunted house or whatever, where you see, of course, Scotty the kid gets taken to hell because he slept with his girlfriend when they were 16.
Yeah.
It's like, so did all of you. Anyway, and
are you going to hell, Caleb?
Oh, for sure.
For sure.
I'll see you there, man. Right
am I,
along
by the way.
Scotty. Yeah, with my man Scotty. So, and Scotty was a Christian too. He even went to church
Oh my, yeah.
the night after, but that wasn't enough. So why is this salvation message enough? It was just like so easy to dispute it,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
And so I did the hell thing, and after that I was like, I'm not giving the salvation message. I don't believe
That this is true.
That this is true. And I'm not going to tell these kids this, you know?
Yeah.
These are super lost, impoverished people,
Yeah.
you know? And so then they said, well, we don't believe, you know, I don't believe that you're saved. And I was like, well, I don't need you to. I don't need you to believe that I'm saved, because
Was that the straw that broke the camel's back and you came home, or?
I think so, because I didn't go back after Christmas. So I think I just stuck it out after Halloween. And I think probably when I was home for Thanksgiving, I decided.
Yeah.
And then when we came home for Christmas, we didn't go back. So.
Yeah. Do you remember any of the conversations that we had about all that?
I remember one time when I called you at House of Horrors about the salvation message thing, and I had talked to my room leader, Amber, about it. And she has the sweetest heart. You know, she was just like a victim of her circumstances for sure,
Yeah.
man. And I remember her like feeling
in a way, all of them were. So
yeah.
we should say that. I mean,
Yes.
not to excuse the poor behavior and the poor decisions and all that, but just to say that, look, we're products of our
It's true.
environment. You know?
And I have to remember that I'm still at a stage in my life where I'm not done being angry about it. I'm not done being just like irked, I guess is the word.
I was going to say icked.
Yeah, just like the lack of accountability is so intolerable to me, you know? And I still, like, I'm friends with these guys on Facebook and stuff, and I still see it, especially like in the, you know, in the politics today. It's just like freaking scary,
Yeah.
you know? But to answer your question, I do remember a time that I called you after I spoke with Amber, and I could tell she was just heartbroken for me because she really believed I was going to hell, you know? And I was like, Amber, I really don't think that's the case, you know? Oh, and there was a time too, they asked me actually to create the hell part of the house. And I was like, guys, this is great. Like, we can do something different than what everybody expects, you know? Let's make it really dark, really cold, really isolated. Like, they're going to expect it to be hot and fiery. Let's surprise them, you know? Like, I can still be creative.
Yeah.
And I went to one of the leaders, and he literally verbatim said to me, hell isn't cold. It's a literal lake of fire. And walked away. So that was definitely like, I mean, that was another one of those things that were like, it was just, I wasn't coming back from that.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah.
like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Like, that's so simple. You give God that much credit. That's it.
Yeah. That little credit.
You know, yeah, right. That little credit.
Yeah.
And so I called you after that that conversation rather with Amber. And I said, I must have asked you, who's right here, Dad, you know, or whatever. And you probably told me that it's not black and white, and that I have a level of maybe objective maturity, you said, I don't know, and that she maybe has a greater level of spiritual maturity than me, but it doesn't mean that I need to take their advice, you know, essentially. And it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to feed me any more than they already have. And I just know, because I know me, that without your and Mom's blessing, I would not have left, you know? But I must have been able to tell that you were like, maybe not necessarily concerned for me, but didn't see the value of me being there any longer either, you know? So then when I came home from Master's
Just for the
Commission-
record, I actually was a little concerned that you were there.
Really?
Yes. Yeah. And Chris.
But we're both like, we're not easily swayed. Because we're just...
And I should tell you, too, that I was actually very proud of both of you because you did stand up for those who were being oppressed. And this really paints them in a terrible light.
It does.
And they're not terrible people. It's just an environment. It's an environment that they grew up in, that they don't know anything else, and they were told the same way you were told to believe it. And some of them broke out of it, some of them didn't. So I just want to make that clear because we don't want to beat up anybody.
Absolutely. You're right.
And we don't want to pretend like we're all right.
Sure.
and they're
No,
all
absolutely
wrong,
not. Right.
know?
In fact, what I was going to say was that kind of something that Chris and I both grew into, at least from what I've observed, is that it's not, we're kind of like used to being told that we're wrong. So the idea that we could be wrong, like to change our belief about something is not difficult because we're not accustomed to the security of being right. You know, we're critical thinkers.
That sounds terrible for me, though.
What do you mean?
Like, Dad, thank you for telling me I was wrong so
No.
often. So
I mean, like in a school setting, you
Yeah,
know, like
yeah.
like in society, you know, most people, just like you, you know, I think it's probably similar to like Grandma Kitty, you know, if you don't do things the neurotypical way, you're told that you're wrong,
yes.
you know?
Yeah.
So no, please don't assume that I'm referring to my parents. I'm referring to society for most of this. And so when we were there, like, you know, these poor kids would ask us questions like this one girl, Marley, Paxton now, actually. And he seems to be doing well,
said
too.
her name.
Yes. But when I knew them, she was Marley. And I remember talking to her about the Adam and Eve story. I think I told you about this.
Yeah.
And she was like, it just doesn't, like, there's something about it that doesn't add up. I was like, well, yeah, for starters, like, how would Eve have even been able to rebel if she didn't already have a free will? Like, her sin nature couldn't be introduced to her by rebelling. It required having it to rebel.
Yeah. Yeah.
And she's like, dude, you're so right. And I'm like, uh-huh. And not like in a condescending way, but just kind of like, dude, people don't think
No.
about this stuff. They just accept what they're told, you know?
Yeah.
And but yeah, I don't know if we felt like it was our duty or we couldn't stand the silence, kind of like what you said about Kevin last night.
Yeah.
Like, we're just not the type that can fake it.
Yeah.
We just can't, you know? And we felt like you are damaging these people.
Yeah.
You know, like, and there were a number of them that struggled with homosexuality.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
I remember that.
Like, it's like, well, if you're dealing with this every year with every student group in the numbers that you are, maybe it's not a struggle and it's just normal.
Yeah.
And they were just so okay with telling them that all of their thoughts were of Satan. Do you know how, like, it's just cruel.
Yeah.
And we couldn't stand it, you know, not to sound self-righteous, but, and I think, frankly, the leadership wanted us gone too.
Oh, I think
You
so.
know?
Yeah. Yeah. You guys were a thorn. Okay. So you went through that experience.
Yeah.
And that was, you would
The
say,
catalyst.
kind of the catalyst
Yeah.
of your
Right. Because
deconstruction.
at that point, it was like, okay, well, all bets are off, you know?
Yeah.
And I can kind of just, plus I had a trustworthy resource in my life that was actively studying these things as well.
Yeah.
And I always trusted without question, had my best interests at heart. So I had that to fall back on. That's why the fear factor wasn't really there, you know? So then I came back and I started working at Target then and met my absolute best friend in the whole world, Chelsea, my girl. She's getting married. Love her. Part of the reason why I'm down, actually, her bridal shower. And she and I would just talk in our little Pizza Hut corner all day, every day, man. And she was just another example of someone that, like, lived in the dysfunctional world but made good on it, you know? And so I don't even think she knows that she's part of my deconstruction. And maybe it's not immediately a part of, you know?
Yeah.
But it allowed, like, a safe environment for me to throw out these ideas that maybe you would give me, that I would find myself, Chris and I would find, you know. I remember Ryan was kind of getting into it then too. So we would kind of throw ideas back and forth. And she could just handle all of it, you know, and she could give me an objective perspective about it, you know.
Yeah.
And then there was a time, okay, so I was working at Target and Chelsea was just a really unconditional resource that I had, you know. And then, okay, so that was like the last straw for me with the Master's Commission thing. I think I would still try to work with them and stuff. And then eventually I was just like, you guys are totally off the deep end, you know, with that Samantha experience. And that was the first time that I felt really hurt by the church. Like,
Okay.
like, I think that's what Master's Commission was for me. Like, I was disgusted and I was hurt by the way that it's like, I'm just a broken person too. Like, don't you claim that we're your first mission? You don't really seem to give a shit about, like you have your students, like, in emotional crisis all the time. And you almost, what's the word? What is that?
And then you're shamed for that emotional crisis.
Right. But it's like, what is it called when you use something to your advantage for profit? Exploit.
Yeah.
It's almost like that, if it's not that. And so that was the first time that I was really hurt, you know. And then I think in that time I recognized that okay, I guess I don't really like associate Jesus with that, with the church, you know,
And this is something that's,
Which
I'm
I
glad you
didn't
said that because,
know before that I didn't do.
yeah.
You know, I wouldn't have
And a
known
lot of people don't know that they don't do that, that they don't separate Jesus from the church.
Or that it's allowed.
Or that it's even allowed.
Yeah.
Yes. And
It's a
the
concept.
church very, very, very often does not reflect who Jesus is. I would
Most
say
often.
very, very, very often. Yes. And so that's an important thing for people to hear.
It is.
Jesus
Not the
and
case for
church
Suncoast.
are
Not at
not
all.
the same thing. And you can understand where people are coming from because, literally Paul calls the church the body of Christ,
Yeah.
right? But he's also in that passage, he's painting this is the way it's supposed to be.
Right.
You're supposed to be, he's supposed to be the head and you're supposed to be the action in the world.
Right.
But that just does not happen all the time.
Right. Because it's a congregation of broken people that don't
Yes.
understand the assignment.
Right.
You know?
Yep.
And so where were we going with that?
Well, where I wanted to go was, I don't know where you were going with it, but what I want to see is how you have, so it's clear how you deconstructed.
Yeah.
Would you say that you've been able to reconstruct?
Oh, right. I was talking about how I realized that I didn't associate Jesus
Yeah.
with those things. Right. So during that time, I clung to my worship music. I still came to Suncoast, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Still came to church.
You were kind of far away.
Yeah, I lived in Ellington.
Yeah.
And, still had you guys. You were really good about that. And so it was just kind of like I didn't feel alone. I just knew I wasn't alone. I really experienced Christ through you guys. Like, even at a time where immediately I was in a state of suffering pretty constantly, I still felt like secure, And so then I moved, right? So that was for like 3 years that I was still in Florida. And I guess, yeah, right. I kept making decisions in my life that I had to be sorry for and knew that I needed something different, right? And I needed to be different, right? I have to go somewhere where I can't do this. I need something new because I don't want to keep doing this, but I don't know what's driving me to do this, And
it's hard to remake yourself when you are in immediate proximity to everything
Right, your
that
orbit.
has made you what you had become.
Right. Your orbit is so, it's so influential.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it's kind of like you can't heal where you were burned kind of thing. And I just didn't know what the burn was coming from, Still figuring it out. But I've come a long way. And so I moved to Maryland. And that was the best thing that could have ever happened to me physically, spiritually, relationally, professionally, everything. It was really hard, and it was a really, really hard first couple of years, but I had Kevin there when he was living in Pennsylvania, and he'd come down and stay with me for the weekends in Frederick, and who I was with at the time, and that was such a presence of Jesus in my life. And I knew...
Kevin O'Hara.
Yes.
For those
Yeah.
who-
Not Kevin Kaiser, Kevin O'Hara. And I just had like a piece of home with me. And I realized that home meant the same thing that I was feeling when I felt Jesus. Okay. So these people bring me Jesus,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was a really, really good part of my reconstruction because faithful people were following through.
Mm-hmm.
I could have confidence in these people, And so it kind of shifted, I guess, my perception of what being a Christian is or being, not really being Christ-like, but again, I didn't realize that they needed to be separated in the first place or like I hadn't made the Jesus and church separation, same kind of thing. Like I didn't recognize that there's a difference between being a Christian and being Christ-like.
Okay.
Gandhi is not a Christian, but he's incredibly Christ-like.
Yeah.
Right. So, so in those experiences, I experienced that. Plus, I had a new place to set a new standard of life that I was going to be living.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of reflected on, okay, what kind of person do I want to be? What does living a life like Christ look like? And that's when you and I must have had the conversation of, I think you said to me, well, what would Lauren's life look like if Jesus were Lauren? Or something, to that effect.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just like an aha moment. Like, oh, I can do that. I know what Jesus values, And now, almost 6 years later, I can't quote really any scripture for you, but I can tell you that I know the heart of Jesus because of what I experienced in the hardest of my times in my life. And then what I allowed myself and chose to become because of who I'd seen Jesus in my life before, And so now in Maryland, I have a pack of people that the only thing they have to say about me is you can have absolute confidence in Lauren. She will never betray you. She will never lie to you. She will always love you. You know what I mean? Like they have the utmost confidence in me. And that can only be because of Jesus.
And a change in locale.
Yes, yeah. Right. So that's why I stay in Maryland for now, because I love it there. And I experience the Lord in a way because it's like who you guys were here has become them there. And we're able to be Christ to one another, Mm-hmm. And so it's like I experience the Spirit of the Lord all the time. Like with my friend Paul, man, like Paul is Chase without ADHD. He's the best, okay? He's Chase that can stay focused. He's the best. I love him. And we went to Fiji together, and we just, work very close to one another. He's very happily married. He's got two of the cutest kids. I love them. And I just experience Jesus and Paul every single day the way that I do in you here and in Chase here and in Ryan here, Mom.
Yeah, right.
And so my reconstruction hasn't been very formal, but it's still been very solid because I think that, I reached an all-time low and was like, okay, well, it's only up from here. I may as well be strategic and I may as well do it right from what I've witnessed is going to bring success to my life, bring relationship success to my life, bring professional success to my life,
Yeah.
And just to have integrity and character and because with your actions come your values.
Mm-hmm.
When you behave in a certain way.
And your actions come from your values.
Yes, but I think people get that.
Well, I think they get what I just said. Yes, you're saying that. Never mind.
Right. But also, when you see the fruits of your labor, so to speak, when you behave in a certain way, you value it because you see the effect.
You see the fruit of
has.
it.
Right.
Right.
And vice versa. When you choose not to behave a certain way.
Yeah.
It may be tempting at first because it's kind of like your Band-Aid, your coping skill. But
and there are a lot of social pressures to act contrary to Christ-likeness in the world, not just in the church, which is funny to even say, but...
right, like for the sake of climbing the corporate ladder?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then choosing not to do that and suffering the consequences for not doing that from a professional standpoint.
Yes.
But still remaining true. We talked a lot about this last night.
Yeah.
To the effort to live out love in truth.
Yes. Right. Yeah. I've had to make a lot of hard decisions that, even in my experience in Maryland, that now preclude me from a lot of potential opportunities with my educational career.
Yeah.
Is that the right word? Preclude? or I now lost those opportunities because I had to make a boundary. And so it was a difficult decision because it was also a friend, and so it was a loss. But I still knew from my experiences in the past that if I allow myself, if I don't live in love and truth, then I don't act in it.
Yes, and that includes loving yourself in the truth too.
Right.
In terms of self-awareness, but also in terms of healthy boundaries for yourself and so on. And I think that you've done a really great job
recognizing where you're at and your potential and where that person is at and their potential. Mm-hmm. I mean, this isn't really related, but I feel like it's important for people to remember that somebody doesn't have necessarily the potential to be who you want them to be simply because you see it. They have to see it themselves and they have to want it.
Yeah.
And so we're only ever so objective, we're subjectively objective, subjectively objective. But I have still chosen to do those things because, of the fruits of my labor and how I've seen it work in the past. And now I don't have to wake up every day and apologize to myself for tolerating treatment that I shouldn't be, and so that kind of ties into what I was saying before. Like, not only do I not want to have to say sorry to other people, but I don't want to have to say sorry to me. Why do I deserve that? If I'm not
to clarify, you don't want to have to say that constantly.
Right. Yeah.
And feel that constantly.
Right.
Because of how you've hurt people.
Right.
Or
I don't have
hurt
to subject myself to any kind of treatment that I wouldn't subject someone else to. Mm-hmm. And so much of that comes from my deconstruction and my reconstruction. Because I think that in heavy evangelicalism, just heavy indoctrination, your life is not yours.
Yeah, and this doesn't just happen in Christianity.
Right. No.
It happens...
No, it happens all over the place.
All over the place, yeah.
And in lots of religions, and in structures, societal structures. Your life is not yours, and from the onset, And so it's very, very, very difficult to even understand what a boundary looks like. Mm-hmm. Never mind maintain it, And I have no idea if I would understand the things that I do today if it weren't for my deconstruction. In fact, I would guess not.
Yeah.
So I'm immensely grateful for that. And I'm grateful to you guys for offering that environment. I know so many people that don't have that. And it's really hard to watch that happen to them with their own parents,
It's interesting to be a pastor in a place that has increasingly become, so we're growing, right?
Yeah.
But we are not growing with church people as much. We're growing with people that had been hurt by church, or who just were turned off by church, or and it's interesting to pastor in a place where the people are so Christ-like, but don't even know it.
Yeah.
Okay. And it's just so refreshing. Like I loved every place that I served. I've said this in another podcast. I've loved every place that I served, and I love the people in every place that I served. I really did. And for a lot
of that though is because of who you are.
Well, I don't know, but
I do.
It is also because of them. And but I've never served in a place that I hate to even call it work. It's really not. It's just a
community
service,
right?
My little contribution to a community that really is the most Christ-like community that I've ever served in. And so if you find yourself in a place where you've been hurt, and you can relate to any of the stories that have been told here, and you need a place to be, even if you're not in this town, because we have a lot of people that watch online. Some of them are in England.
That's what I do.
Yeah. But just know that there is a place here where, even virtually, where you can feel connected in community with people that understand that we're all broken and that
It's a truly safe place.
right, free of shame,
Right. There are many
without being free of accountability, because I don't want to paint that picture either.
Right.
We do want to hold each other accountable, but we want to do that without shame
Totally.
and just with a genuine effort in love and truth, right? To see each other ascend to our potentials
Right.
as
Suncoast feels like a rehabilitation to me.
it is in many respects. It really is.
In the best of ways.
Yes.
It feels like a safe place. There are so many pseudo-safe places. So many places that claim to be safe. So many people that claim to be safe
and aren't.
and aren't.
Right.
That's not true here.
Yeah.
And I mean, we could go on all day long about, with examples of that. But if you're sick of being let down, you won't be here. That's for sure.
It's way less likely anyway.
Way less likely. Yeah.
There's a lot of good people here.
Lots of good people.
And I'm grateful to God and grateful to them for what we have here. And I'm grateful for you,
I'm grateful for you.
my little pumpkin. And I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
You really have changed a lot and grown more and more into the person of your, I guess, to sound a little cliche, the you that Jesus would be if he were you.
And
you
that's
really are growing in that direction. So.
resonated with me ever since you said it. It's just like, okay, well, what does that look like? It doesn't look like this. It does look like this. And those things aren't mutually exclusive, by the way, either. Okay? Just because you're not doing one thing doesn't mean you are doing another. Actively seek what would be Christ-like. Just not necessarily not Satan-like. Does that make sense?
Yes.
I don't even know if Satan's real. We haven't even had that conversation, but you get what I'm trying to say.
Yeah. We'll talk about that later.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
I love
Thanks,
you.
Caleb.